My wife betrayed me in the worst possible way by sleeping with her own sister's husband, and all within the first year of our marriage. In one reckless move, she shattered not just our relationship, but also her sister's. Now that I've decided to file for divorce and take legal action, both sides of the family are turning against me. They say I should be more understanding, that I never truly loved her, and that I should consider the trauma she suffered growing up, particularly the fact that her mother was unfaithful. My name is David, I'm 34 years old, and this is, without a doubt, one of the hardest things I've ever had to share. I don't even know where to begin. But I guess I'll start with the moment that changed everything. The day I got that message from Rose. She's 36, my wife Alice's older sister, and I never could have predicted what she was about to tell me. It happened about 6 months ago. I remember the day so clearly, but not because it was special, because it was just an ordinary evening, and I had no idea my world was about to be turned upside down. I had just come home from work, exhausted but content. I poured myself a drink, expecting a quiet night like any other. Then my phone buzzed. It was a text from Rose. That in itself wasn't unusual. Our families had always been close, so hearing from her wasn't surprising. But something about this message felt different. There was no casual small talk, no greetings, just a single question. Can we meet up? In person? Something in my gut told me this was serious. I asked her what was going on, and all she said was, "It's about Alice and Terry." Instantly, my stomach dropped. Terry, 39, was Rose's husband. A guy I'd always gotten along with. Maybe not best friends, but I had no reason to suspect anything shady. Until now. The next day, we met at a coffee shop. The moment I saw Rose, I knew this wasn't going to be good. She looked wrecked, like she hadn't slept in days. She wasted no time, just pulled out her phone and handed it to me. What I saw changed everything. Message after message, picture after picture. Alice and Terry had been sneaking around behind our backs. I read texts like, "Last night was amazing, can't wait to see you again," and my blood ran cold. But the worst part? The photos. Not just innocent or flirty pictures, but explicit, intimate ones that made my stomach churn. I could barely breathe. I just sat there, unable to process what I was seeing. I don't know how long I stayed silent, but Rose didn't rush me. She just sat across from me, waiting. Eventually, I managed to thank her, though I don't even remember how I got the words out. Then I left. I don't know how long I sat in my car afterward, gripping the steering wheel, staring blankly ahead. My mind was racing. How long had this been going on? Why? Had I missed the signs? Was it something I did? Did they actually think they would never get caught? The drive home was a blur. When I walked through the door, Alice was sitting on the couch, scrolling through her phone, completely unaware of what was coming. The moment she looked up and saw my face, I think she knew. I didn't yell. I didn't throw accusations. I just asked her, plain and simple, "Did you sleep with Terry?" Her hesitation lasted only a second, but that was all I needed. Then came the tears, the apologies, the excuses. She insisted it wasn't what I thought, but when I pressed her, she finally admitted it. It had happened more than once. A mistake, she called it. A lapse in judgment. But tell me, how do you accidentally sleep with someone multiple times? She tried to justify it, saying it happened during a rough patch in our marriage. But let's be real, every couple goes through tough times. That doesn't give anyone a free pass to cheat. There were a dozen other ways she could have handled whatever she was feeling, but she chose the worst one. I couldn't even stand to look at her that night. Without another word, I packed a bag and walked out the door. I had no plan, no idea where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stay there and pretend everything was fine. In a matter of moments, our entire marriage felt like a lie. And it wasn't just my life she had torn apart. She had ruined Rose's marriage too. One selfish decision, and now 2 families were left in ruins. Looking back, that's where I made my biggest mistake. I shouldn't have left. I was so overwhelmed with anger and betrayal that I wasn't thinking clearly. I just needed space to breathe, to get away from Alice before I said or did something I'd regret. But leaving that night turned out to be the worst possible decision. You see, the house we lived in wasn't just any home. It had been in my family for generations. My grandparents had lived there, my parents had passed it down to me when they retired and moved into a senior community. I had always imagined raising my future kids in that house. And now, because of Alice's actions, everything was slipping through my fingers. After a few days of clearing my head, I realized I needed to go back and figure out my next steps. Whether it meant counseling, separation, or divorce, we at least needed to talk. So, I drove back home, expecting to have a difficult conversation, but never imagining what I was about to walk into. I pulled into the driveway, grabbed my keys, and walked up to the door. But when I tried to unlock it, the key wouldn't turn. At first, I thought I was so distracted by everything that I was just fumbling with it. But after a few tries, it hit me. Alice had changed the locks. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door in disbelief. This was my house, my family's home, and yet, I was locked out like I was some intruder. When Alice finally opened the door, she just stood there, completely emotionless, like I was a stranger. I asked her what the hell she was doing, locking me out of my own house. She shrugged and said, "You left, so I thought you weren't coming back." Her words alone were bad enough, but the way she said them, so calm, so indifferent, made my blood boil. She acted like what she had done was completely reasonable, as if changing the locks on me after cheating was a normal, justified response. I told her I wasn't leaving. I had every right to be there. This was my house. My name was on everything. But before I could even step inside, she cut me off and told me that if I didn't leave, she'd call the cops. At first, I thought she was bluffing. We had been married for years. Surely, she wouldn't actually call the police on me. But 5 minutes later, 2 squad cars pulled up in front of the house. I couldn't believe it. Alice had told them I was being aggressive and threatening, which was a complete lie. I hadn't even raised my voice, let alone touched her. But when it comes to situations like this, the police don't take any risks. They listened to both of us, but in the end, they strongly suggested I leave and handle things legally. So, that's exactly what I'm doing. I couldn't wrap my head around what was happening. I was the one who had been cheated on. I was the one who had been betrayed. And yet, somehow, I was the one being forced out of my own home like a criminal. But I wasn't about to argue with the police on my front lawn and risk getting arrested. So, with no other choice, I left. I drove straight to my best friend's place, where I crashed on his couch for the next few days. My mind was spinning, my emotions all over the place, but I knew I had to act fast. The first thing I did was call a lawyer. I laid everything out, the affair, the house, the way Alice had locked me out, and they immediately got to work. Filing for divorce was the obvious first step, but there was more to it than that. Alice had no legal right to keep me out of my own home, so we started the process of evicting her through the courts. The house belonged to me, plain and simple. It had been in my family for generations, and I had the paperwork to prove it. But because Alice and I had lived there together as a married couple, the legal process wasn't as straightforward as just telling her to leave. I had to go through the proper channels, which meant it was going to be a long and messy fight. And as if things weren't bad enough, Alice didn't just sit back and accept responsibility. Oh no. Instead, she started playing the victim. She twisted the story, making it sound like I had abandoned her after some petty argument, conveniently leaving out the fact that she had been sleeping with her sister's husband behind my back. And, of course, she had to throw in some extra lies for good measure, telling people that I was aggressive, even dangerous. That part hurt the most. Anyone who knows me knows I'm not that guy. I have never been violent or threatening. But now, thanks to Alice's lies, I found myself constantly having to defend my own character, not just in court, but in everyday life. People who I thought would be in my corner were suddenly looking at me differently, and it made me sick. But here's where things really took a turn. Once Alice realized I wasn't playing around, once she saw those divorce papers and knew I was serious about getting her out of my house, suddenly, she wanted to work things out. I almost laughed at the irony. She wasn't thinking about working things out when she was sneaking around with Terry. She didn't care about our marriage when she was lying to my face and betraying me over and over again. But now that she was facing real consequences, now that she was about to lose the security of living in my home, suddenly, she was desperate to fix things. The texts started rolling in. Then the voicemails. Message after message, all saying the same thing. How sorry she was, how she had made a terrible mistake, how she wanted to go to counseling and rebuild what we had. She was practically begging for another chance. But at that point, I was done. I didn't care how sorry she was. I didn't care about counseling. There was nothing left to fix. She had burned everything to the ground, and I had no interest in sifting through the ashes. I just wanted her gone, for good. I thought that decision would be the end of it. Oh, how wrong I was. The moment I made it clear that reconciliation was off the table, the guilt tripping started. And not just from Alice. No, both sides of the family suddenly felt the need to chime in. People who had no business getting involved started acting like they had a say in my marriage, telling me I was the one being unreasonable. Apparently, I was supposed to just forgive and forget. A few days ago, my sister called me, and I thought, finally, someone who would understand. But instead of supporting me, she hit me with the classic, marriage is complicated. You should at least hear her out. And then, the kicker, if you really loved her, you'd forgive her. I didn't know whether to laugh or throw my phone across the room. What part of she slept with her sister's husband are people not understanding? This isn't some petty argument over dirty dishes. She didn't just forget our anniversary or say something hurtful in the heat of the moment. She betrayed me in the worst possible way. And not just once. She admitted it happened multiple times. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. A conscious, deliberate choice that she made, knowing full well how much damage it would cause. To me, to Rose, to our entire family. How the hell am I supposed to come back from that? It's insane how quickly people have jumped to her defense. The moment I made it clear that I wasn't willing to work things out, suddenly, I became the unreasonable one. My sister, for example, went on this whole rant about how marriages go through rough patches and how, sometimes, infidelity can actually serve as a wake-up call for both partners to fix their relationship. Like, am I supposed to be grateful that Alice cheated? As if her betrayal was some twisted gift that's supposed to make our marriage stronger? The logic was so absurd that I almost couldn't believe what I was hearing. And it's not just my sister. Alice's parents have been relentless. Her mom has been blowing up my phone, sending text after text about how family is important and how Alice deeply regrets what she did. The best part? She actually had the audacity to remind me of the vows Alice and I took, as if I was the one who broke them. It's wild to me that so many people think I should be the one forgiving, compromising, and bending over backward to save this marriage. Meanwhile, Alice is the one who took a match to it and burned it to the ground. But the craziest part? Even my own parents have chimed in. And they've always been pretty hands-off when it comes to my personal life, so for them to step in now was unexpected. My mom called me the other day, and while she said she understood how hurt I was, she also suggested that maybe I should consider giving Alice another chance. Her reasoning? You've been together for so long. It's hard to throw away all those years over a mistake. I get where she's coming from. I really do. But this isn't just about time. This is about trust. About betrayal. About the fact that the one person I was supposed to be able to rely on the most, the one who stood in front of me and promised to be faithful, lied to my face over and over again. And not just any lie. She slept with someone who is basically family. The layers of betrayal run so deep that I don't even know how to explain it to people anymore. I try to make my sister understand, but do you know what she hit me with? Everyone makes mistakes. You have to decide if her mistake is bigger than your love for her. That pissed me off more than anything, because it's not about how much I loved her. I did love her with everything I had. But love isn't some magical force that erases betrayal. It doesn't undo the choices she made. And there are consequences for those choices. She's facing them now, and that's not my fault. I refuse to sacrifice my self-respect, my sanity, and my future just because we have history together. And another thing, everyone keeps bringing up Alice's parents and their messed up marriage, like that somehow justifies what she did. Every conversation lately turns into this weird therapy session where I'm supposed to sit there and unpack her family's baggage instead of focusing on what she did to our marriage. Alice told me a long time ago that her mother cheated on her father for years. And I don't mean one mistake or a single bad decision. I mean multiple affairs, with multiple men, over the course of their entire marriage. Alice grew up watching it unfold, knowing her mother was stepping out on her father, seeing the tension and the damage it caused. Back when she first told me about it, I felt sorry for her. I couldn't imagine what it must have been like growing up in that kind of environment. And now, looking back, I wonder if that's why she did what she did. Maybe, to her, cheating was just a normal part of a relationship, something that happens, gets swept under the rug, and life goes on. But that's not how I see things. That's not how I was raised. And that's definitely not the kind of marriage I want for myself. Apparently, her dad knew about the affairs but never did anything, which honestly blows my mind. He just stayed, turned a blind eye, and acted like everything was fine. I can't even begin to understand how he managed that. According to Alice, he did it to keep the family together, but at what cost? Over time, it destroyed him. She told me he became more withdrawn, stopped really engaging with the family, and eventually just checked out emotionally. By the end of their marriage, he and Alice's mom were nothing more than roommates, just going through the motions of life together. Alice always described her mom as the controlling one and her dad as too passive to stand up to her, which is why the cheating went on for years without any real consequences. And now, somehow, Alice and her relatives are using that as an excuse for what she did to me, as if growing up in a dysfunctional household somehow justifies betraying her husband. That's the part that really drives me crazy. They expect me to be understanding and considerate of her past trauma, but at the end of the day, I'm not the one who cheated. She is. And yet, somehow, I'm the one who's supposed to be empathetic and forgiving. Alice even said, "You know how messed up my childhood was. Like that's supposed to erase everything she did." Look, I get it. I understand that growing up in a toxic environment can mess with your perception of relationships and boundaries. But that doesn't give you a free pass to hurt other people. I didn't marry her mother. I married her. And she swore up and down that she hated what she saw as a child, that she'd never do the same thing. And yet, here we are. Her family, especially her mom, keeps trying to convince me that this isn't really who Alice is, that she's just acting out unresolved issues from her childhood. I've heard everything from, she's still learning how to have a healthy relationship, to she's afraid of losing love just like her dad did. And honestly, it feels like nothing but excuses. What kills me is that they expect me to stick around and help her figure it out. Just because her dad stayed in a marriage full of betrayal doesn't mean I should do the same. It's like everyone around me is trying to push me into the role of the understanding husband who forgives and moves forward, no matter how much pain he's in. But what about me? What about where I'm coming from? I'm the one who got cheated on. I'm the one who got blindsided by the person I thought I'd spend the rest of my life with. Yet somehow, all the sympathy is going to Alice because of her trauma. It's exhausting. So yeah, here I am, stuck in this weird limbo where it feels like the entire world is on Alice's side, and I'm just out here trying to figure out how to put my life back together. Honestly, I feel like I'm losing my mind. Any advice would be appreciated because right now, I feel like I'm drowning. Hey, everyone. First off, I just want to say thank you. I honestly didn't expect so many responses, and I've been overwhelmed, in a good way. I've been feeling so lost, like I'm the only one going through this. But hearing from all of you made me realize I'm not as alone as I thought. Some of you suggested that I reach out to Rose, and honestly, I thought, why not? We hadn't really spoken since this whole disaster blew up, but we were both dealing with our own versions of the same nightmare. So I took your advice and gave her a call. Rose told me she's been facing a lot of the same pressure from family and friends that I have. People keep telling her that forgiveness is key, that she should consider giving Terry another chance, especially because of their kids. That completely blew my mind. How do people even think that's a reasonable suggestion after what they did? But Rose, being the badass that she is, said she's blocked all those people and is fully committed to moving on. She refuses to let anyone guilt her into staying in a toxic situation, and honestly, I respect the hell out of that. Talking to her made me feel like I wasn't crazy for wanting out of this mess. She gets it. She's living through the same nightmare, and she's handling it with so much strength. She told me, "You've got to do what's best for you. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're in the wrong for wanting to protect your peace." And man, I really needed to hear that. With everyone in my ear telling me I should forgive Alice, I started doubting my own feelings. But hearing Rose say she's done with Terry and ready to move on gave me so much clarity. It reminded me that I don't have to justify my decision to anyone, not Alice, not our families, and certainly not the people who don't know the full story. Rose also said something that really stuck with me. The longer you hold on to the hope of fixing something that's already broken beyond repair, the more you lose yourself. I could hear in her voice that she was done losing herself for the sake of a marriage that wasn't worth saving anymore. And that hit me hard because I realized I'd been doing the same thing. I've been stuck in this emotional limbo, second-guessing every decision and worrying about what everyone else thinks, and it's been tearing me apart. But Rose made it clear, there's nothing wrong with choosing yourself over a relationship that's damaged beyond fixing. I told her about all the pressure I've been getting from my own family and Alice's relatives, and she just laughed in that, I know exactly what you're going through kind of way. She said it's the same for her. People always have opinions, but at the end of the day, they're not the ones who have to live with the consequences. She told me that some relatives even tried to guilt trip her by saying she wasn't thinking about her kids or the family's reputation, but she shut that down real quick. She said, "The best thing I can do for my kids is show them that it's okay to walk away from something that's toxic." That hit me hard. I don't have kids, but the message is still the same. Sometimes walking away is the healthiest option, no matter what people say. I've spent so much time worrying about what others might think of me divorcing Alice, especially since they've been guilt-tripping me with all this talk about love, forgiveness, and loyalty. But talking to Rose reminded me that I can't live my life based on other people's expectations. I have to do what's best for me, even if it means upsetting a few people along the way. So, to everyone who encouraged me to reach out to Rose, thank you. It made a huge difference. Hey everyone. Some of you were curious about how exactly Rose found out about the affair, and honestly, it's a pretty wild and messed up story. It wasn't some dramatic confrontation or a sudden confession. She basically uncovered the whole thing like a detective. So here's how it all went down. Alice and Terry work in offices that are practically next to each other, so it was never unusual for them to grab lunch together or hang out during their breaks. In fact, Rose never thought anything of it. They work in the same industry, they've known each other for years, and Alice was her sister. Why would she ever suspect anything? Terry had always framed it as a casual, work friend kind of thing, and Rose had no reason to doubt him. But then, she started noticing some odd transactions on Terry's credit card. There was this recurring charge that showed up every week. It wasn't a big amount, just a few dollars here and there, but it was always near both their offices. At first, she assumed it was just for lunch. Terry had mentioned grabbing food with coworkers now and then, and with Alice's office being so close, it made sense that they might occasionally eat together. Nothing suspicious, right? Still, something about it nagged at her. The charges were consistent, happening almost like clockwork every week. At first, she brushed it off, telling herself she was overthinking it. But then, one day, while picking Terry up from work, his car was at the mechanic or something. She saw the name from the credit card charges on a sign. And that's when everything clicked. It wasn't a restaurant. It wasn't a coffee shop. It was a hotel. Rose told me that in that moment, her stomach dropped. That creeping sense of dread took over, and suddenly, all those small, insignificant charges had a much darker meaning. She didn't say anything right away. She just sat with that realization, trying to make sense of it. It was one of those moments where your brain fights against the truth, where you desperately try to come up with some innocent explanation even though deep down, you already know the answer. She could have confronted Terry right then, but she needed to be sure. That night, after they got home and Terry fell asleep, she did something she never thought she'd have to do. She checked his phone. And what she found shattered her world. The evidence was all there. Texts, pictures, videos. Everything. Alice and Terry weren't just grabbing lunch or having some emotional connection on the side. It was so much worse. They had been sneaking off to that hotel regularly, and the messages left no doubt about what was going on. From the way Rose described it, it was all laid out in black and white. Intimate conversations, plans to meet up, and even photos that made her feel sick to her stomach. She told me that was the longest night of her life. She didn't sleep at all, just sat there, scrolling through the messages over and over, trying to process the betrayal. How could the two people she trusted most do this to her? How long had they been lying to her face? The next morning, she didn't even confront Terry right away. She needed to talk to someone first. And that's when she called me. For those of you asking about Alice's parents and where they are now, that's a bit of a complicated story in itself. Alice's dad passed away a few years ago. From what Alice told me when we first started dating, he was a good man, kind, quiet, and deeply loyal. But he wasn't the type to stand up for himself. He knew about Alice's mom cheating on him for years, but instead of leaving, he just stayed. It was like he was too exhausted to fight or didn't have the strength to change things. He simply endured it, as if that was the only option he had. It's heartbreaking, really. Over time, it wore him down. Alice always said that by the end of his life, he wasn't the same man he used to be. The years of betrayal and emotional neglect drained the life out of him, and he just faded into the background of his own marriage. He stopped engaging, stopped fighting for anything, and just went through the motions. His presence was there, but his spirit was long gone. After he passed, whatever remained of Alice's relationship with her mother completely unraveled. They had already been drifting apart for years, but his death solidified the distance between them. Alice never forgave her mom for the way she treated him, for the years of lies, manipulation, and selfishness. She carried a deep resentment toward her, and it was one of the biggest sources of tension in their family. Alice always talked about how much she despised the way her mom behaved. She hated the control, the manipulation, and above all, the way her mother justified hurting the people who loved her. Alice swore up and down that she would never be like her, that she would never make the same mistakes. And yet, here we are. That's the part that stings the most. After everything she said, after all the times she told me she wanted to be different, she still followed in her mother's footsteps. Whether it was because of the way she was raised or simply her own choices, I don't know. But seeing the parallels between them is impossible to ignore. And now, the same people who condemned Alice's mother for cheating are bending over backward to excuse Alice for doing the exact same thing. As for her mom, she's still around, but she and Alice have no contact anymore. It was a slow, gradual process. At first, Alice just started visiting less often. Their phone calls became shorter and more infrequent. The distance between them kept growing until, eventually, there was a huge blow-up. One final argument that severed their relationship completely. I wasn't there for it, but from what Alice told me, it had been building for years. She finally hit her breaking point and decided she'd had enough of her mother's manipulative ways. She cut her off entirely, refusing to let her be part of her life any longer. At the time, I completely understood her decision. From everything Alice had told me, her mom was a master manipulator, always playing the victim and guilt-tripping Alice into feeling sorry for her. She never took responsibility for anything, not for her actions, not for the pain she caused, not for the family she tore apart. And now, ironically, Alice's family is using those same tactics to defend her. It's like history repeating itself in the worst possible way. Hey, everyone. I know it's been months since my last update, but I finally have some news, and let me tell you, it's been a wild ride. The whole legal process dragged on way longer than I expected, but I'm relieved to say that it's finally over. And honestly, that alone feels like a huge weight off my shoulders. One of the biggest battles was over the house. Alice tried to argue that she deserved a share of it since she had lived there during our marriage, but the fact that it had been in my family for generations worked heavily in my favor. Still, I won't lie, there were some seriously stressful moments throughout the process. Alice didn't exactly take the high road. She played dirty at times, throwing out accusations and twisting things to make herself look like the victim. At one point, she even tried to claim that I had been emotionally neglectful in our marriage. That one hit hard. I mean, was I perfect? No. But who is? Marriage isn't easy, and we all have our flaws. But no matter what, I was always faithful. I was committed. Even when things got tough, I genuinely believed we were a team. Apparently, in her mind, that was enough to justify what she did. For me, though, hearing her rewrite our history like that just made it even harder to keep my composure when we had to face each other in court. But in the end, the truth won out. The judge saw through all of it. The ruling was clear. The house was legally mine, and Alice had no real claim to it. She was ordered to move out. Watching her pack up and leave was one of the most surreal moments of my life. I won't pretend it was all just relief. There was a strange finality to it, a realization that this chapter of my life was truly closing. As much as I wanted to move on, it was still bizarre to watch someone I had once loved walk out of my life for good. It's one thing to say you're done with someone, but seeing it actually happen? That hits differently. But here's the part that actually feels good to say. We're officially divorced. It's still weird catching myself thinking of her as my ex-wife instead of just Alice. I guess that's normal when you've been with someone for so long. It takes time for your brain to catch up with reality. The only downside, I do have to pay her alimony. Not exactly thrilled about that part. She's not working full-time at the moment, and even though I hate the idea of supporting her financially after everything she did, that's just how the legal system works. It's frustrating, but at the end of the day, it's a small price to pay for finally being free of this mess. If this is what it takes to have her out of my life, then so be it.